So Imperium, Xenos and Chaos, who gets the most love and most releases from Games Workshop, and who gets the least? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the model kits that Games Workshop has released, with really quite a cool graphic that breaks down kit releases by faction and super faction. It's no doubt that over the last few years, Space Marines and the Imperium in general have got the lion's share of new releases, but it's quite interesting to see by how much and also how this compares with the trends going back over the decades. So this excellent little graphic is taken from an infographic which was produced by Jojo from Abruzzo on Reddit, who has truly done the Emperor's work, compiling a massive list of all of Games Workshop's releases and plotting them on a nice timeline showing what was released when. It honestly must have taken a fantastic amount of work, and I'll put a link to it down in the video description. A few weeks back we talked about the average age of model kits for every faction, but another really interesting element from the graphic is this one, and it shows the proportion of Space Marines, other Imperium, Chaos and Xenos kits that have been released over the years. It's handily broken down into 4-year chunks so we can see all the way back to 1987, and how the support for the various factions has waxed and waned over the years. Space Marines didn't used to get quite as much support as they do now, though have actually kept up some fairly consistent releases over the past few years, taking around about 30% of all the models that have been sold by Games Workshop. Other Imperium releases used to be almost as big as Space Marines, went through a phase where they got almost no releases at all, but then have come back stronger in 9th edition, with some releases for things like Admech, Sisters of Battle and Adeptus Custodes. Chaos in general always seems to have been a fairly small subset of releases, but they've had a fairly decent set of releases since 8th edition dropped. There was all the Death Guard stuff, plenty of demons, and remakes for a lot of the core Chaos Space Marine units. And Xenos, interestingly enough, used to be really high, in the early years of Games Workshop almost being 50% worth of releases, though this has waned somewhat, and particularly in 8th and 9th edition they've seen very little love comparatively. I did find it quite interesting just how many kits were released for Xenos over the past decade or so, and just how drastically that shrunk into 8th and 9th edition. I was surprised that it was quite so low, only 18% of all releases since 8th edition, and that includes the frankly pretty massive re-release of Codex Necrons. I believe the Necrons have had just about as many releases as all the other Xenos factions put together over the course of 8th and 9th. I was interested just to see just how underrepresented Chaos was, at least in theory it's Imperium, Chaos and Xenos, as the three major staples of Warhammer 40k, but I suppose it does stand to reason that Chaos hasn't got all that much. For quite a lot of Games Workshop's history, almost all Chaos things have revolved around the Chaos Space Marine Codex. Then Demons and Thousand Sons came along, and it's only in more recent times that we've also got Chaos Knights and Death Guard. Not really too surprising that they've seen quite a lot of releases over 8th and 9th, it's been far more like a third of all releases. If you look at the actual more detailed data, which you can see on the infographic itself, then you can see that quite a lot of the Imperium releases were very Guard heavy. Back in early Games Workshop times, it seems that the Imperial Guard were almost as well supported as the Space Marines, but then around about after 2010 or so, suddenly Guard releases just get very thin on the ground indeed, and indeed you can argue that they've lost quite a lot of models since then in the discontinuation of all of their metal ranges. Finally, I was quite interested by the Space Marine trend. I thought it was interesting that despite the massive influx of Primaris units since 8th edition started, the proportion of releases that are purely for Space Marines is still sitting at around about 30%. It does seem to have been really quite consistent over the decades. I guess one of the main differences is that the vast majority of recent Space Marine releases could be used by virtually any one of the Space Marine sub-factions. Before that, there were really quite a lot of releases that were tailored to one specific chapter, say stuff uniquely for Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Space Wolves or Death Watch. I think that might have represented Games Workshop not really knowing what to do with the Space Marine range, which was already quite big, so they went down the route of making more and more specialised stuff for more individual Space Marine ranges, before they decided to start redoing the range as a whole in their Primaris project. Of course, I do know that these numbers really aren't a be-all and end-all in a vacuum. In particular, lumping Xenos together all as one unit really isn't the most helpful thing in the world, as in reality Xenos armies are split into various different ones, and unlike Space Marines where they might be able to make use of quite a lot of new releases, say a Tau release isn't going to mean much for an Orc player. Nevertheless, despite the last 4 years or so, I did find it interesting that Games Workshop have released more Xenos kits than Space Marine kits, and in some time periods by quite a considerable margin. I think aside from numbers of releases as well, people will judge things based on how many new kits are released as opposed to how many ones are just updated. and I think that's certainly a factor as to why people see the Space Marine releases as a bit more over the top. Aside from a few special characters, every Primaris release is basically a brand new unit added to an already fairly bloated range. Aside from Necrons and some Genestealer cult units, a lot of the Xenos model updates in recent years have just been updates to already existing sculpts. I think that's been a big factor as to why Space Marines have quite so many units when compared with everyone else. I did mention it earlier as well, but you can also help gauge which factions get the most love from Games Workshop based on how old their average kit age is. I did make another video on that based on the same excellent infographic, and I'll also link that one down in the video description. So I hope you've enjoyed a quick look at some interesting numbers anyway. Again, I strongly recommend checking out the original post on Reddit, and a big hats off to Mr. Jojo. If you've enjoyed the video and would like to see more like it, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I do like to make some more general discussion related videos, as well as our more regularly scheduled tactics content. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel recently, I would just like to mention one way to support the channel if you're in the UK, which is my Element Games affiliate link, which you can find down in the video description. If you are thinking about ordering in any models in the near future, Element Games is an excellent discount retailer in the UK. They give 10 to 20% off Games Workshop's miniatures, and if you buy anything after clicking the link in the video description, a small amount of money goes to help support the channel. Can be a way to help keep these videos coming if you are thinking about buying something anyway. For people in the USA and Canada, there's also a link for Amazon as well. If you were thinking about buying something off there, then click the link and a small amount goes to help support Auspex Tactics. A big thank you to you guys who have been using those links, it is very nice of you, and it does help support the channel. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.